Polymancer registered sign was a magazine covering role-playing games and related hobbies such as miniatures, wargaming, and LARPs. The magazine was published in Canada by Polymancer Studios Inc. It was distributed across the United States, across Canada, in the UK, in Australia, and in New Zealand, as well as having hard copies archived with Archives Canada. In Canada, 1. Library and Archives Canada, reference to issue number 1. The first issue was published in 2004 and it ran for 32 issues. Nature of magazine and content. Polymancer's articles and scenarios were written without reference to any specific rules system. There were a few exceptions to this rule where specific role-playing game rule systems were referenced. The magazine for the most part was system independent, so that players of different game systems could make use of them. The magazine covered many gaming genres such as fantasy, science fiction, horror, modern day, pulp. Most role-playing game magazines at that time just covered fantasy, in large measure due to Dungeons & Dragons, a fantasy RPG that was, and continues to be, the most popular RPG of its kind. Polymancer was different from many magazines that covered RPGs by being printed. Many gaming magazines such as Pyramid were only available online. The April 19, 2007 announcement that Paizo Publishing's license to produce Dragon and Dungeon magazines was to end in September 2007, without being renewed, left Polymancer as one of the few printed RPG hobby magazines geared towards consumers left. See the Wikipedia role-playing game magazines category for a list. Wizards announced that the two magazines will be replaced by a yet unspecified online initiative. Quote, "There was a complete adventure scenario in every issue of the magazine, which remained for the life of the publication as being playable right out of the box." Quote, "A scenario map was included in each issue's center spread. There was also downloadable material to aid the game master available on the publisher's website. For most of the scenarios, articles in Polymancer tended to be long, over 4 pages, and the black and white illustrations differed from the color artwork found in Dragon. Polymancer was comparable to how Dragon was in the 1980s. The articles in Polymancer were eclectic, but they appeared under a few regular headings. Jousting with Words was the editorial, an opinion piece by the editor. The Lich's Niche was a ranting opinion column written in the form of an interview with a lich. Tech Talk was about ways to use technology, especially computers, in gaming. It did not last beyond 2006. Gaming Digital was about play-by-email games. The Gauntlet was generally a column dealing with problems game masters might face and how to solve them. They tended to be instructional in tone. Mojo was Polymancer's own generic game rules system. Each article grew the rule system in a serialized manner. It also presented additional rules should a particular entry for that issue required them. Mojo was announced in issue number 2 with the description that it was meant to be easy to convert to other game systems. Mojo was available for free from the magazine's website. Plot Fodder was about creating adventure ideas and more importantly adventure seeds and threads from everyday or general topics. Adventure Scenarios. There was a full adventure scenario in every issue. During its run, Polymancer had horror, fantasy, post-apocalyptic, science fiction, pulp, cyberpunk, and espionage scenarios. One scenario was written to be played as a set of linked miniatures wargame battles, as an RPG adventure, or both. Most Polymancer adventures were written for use with any RPG rules system. However, 3 adventures were written for specific RPGs. C. J. Corella's Witchcraft, by Eden Studios. Jovian Chronicles by DreamPod 9, and Harp by C.E. The latter two adventures had the statistics that were compatible with the rules for the games. The adventures were written for side-by-side with Polymancer's own Mojo rules system. See below, which was written to be convertible into many other game rules systems. The Witchcraft adventure contained very few references to rules, so it was hoped to be easily convertible into the rules for other horror RPGs. Comics. More than one comic, or cartoon, appeared in Polymancer magazine during its publication run. There was a serial comic called Side Quest about a group of roleplayers that appeared in issues 1 through 8, as well as a one-panel cartoon entitled Quotable Quotes that started in issue number 8. This one-panel cartoon was based on humorous quotes from games that were supplied the magazine's readership. There was also Dice Quest, which began in issue number 10, a four-panel cartoon about the dice used by role-players, the characters being anthropomorphized polyhedral dice. Games published in Polymancer magazine. As of May 2009, 3 game rules systems had been published in Polymancer magazine as articles. Mojo, a generic multi-purpose rules system designed for the magazine. Pummel, a rules-light system designed for use by an inclusion in Polymancer during its initial publication run. And Space Pummel, a rules-light system designed for use by an inclusion in Polymancer during its initial publication run. Each of these game rules systems were implemented in Polymancer magazine in order to allow the content to contain usable game stats, while maintaining the publication's policy of being easily convertible to rules systems that the magazine's readers would prefer to use themselves. Each of these game systems was playable on its own. However, Mojo was a free role-playing game system designed to adapt to any campaign setting. The Mojo rules system were created by Polymancer Studios Inc. in 2004 and was first offered in the publication in 2004, and first serialized in Polymancer in January 2005. Purpose of Mojo. Mojo was a role-playing game rules system developed by Polymancer Studios Inc. Mojo was described in the pages of Polymancer magazine as a percentile-based system, and in Polymancer Studios' press releases as the infinitely convertible role-playing rules system. The Mojo RPG was created as an ultra-generic, bare-bones RPG system. The publisher described this rules system as one that was designed so that game statistics for tasks, skills, items, magic spells, and so on could be easily converted to their equivalents in other RPGs. 2. Reference to Mojo press release. They did this so that adventure scenarios, equipment articles, and scenario-based content could contain material with relevant stats, and still be useful to as many different kinds of RPG players as possible. It was stressed that Polymancer Studios did not intend to create another generic RPG as a product, but rather as a tool to make the magazine more relevant. This was repeatedly stated by people who worked for Polymancer Studios in the magazine itself, and also in podcast interviews. Format of publication Mojo was first introduced in Polymancer Volume 1, Issue Number 2. The rules have been published incrementally in the pages of Polymancer magazine, one section of rules at a time, with each rules section being a magazine article. For example, the Mojo article in Volume 1 Issue Number 4 of Polymancer covered character generation, while the Mojo article in Volume 2 Issue Number 4 of Polymancer was a set of psionics rules. As of May 2009, there were 16 published Mojo articles in Polymancer magazine. Basic rules Although based on percentile dice, Mojo differed from other percentile-based games such as Call of Cthulhu and Rolemaster. Basic task resolution was accomplished by rolling under the character's attribute plus relevant skill, plus a modifier set by the game master on an ad hoc basis. Combat used the same system. A free PDF of the Mojo rules system was available from the publisher's website. Mojo history 2002 Mojo rules set entered final playtesting. 2003 Basic Mojo rules available to public. 2004 Mojo Advanced released to public. 2005 through 2009. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 2. Introduction to Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 3. Task Resolution in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 4. Character Creation Skills and Attributes in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 5. Character Creation 2. Education and Background in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 6. Fleshing Out the Character in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 7. Equipping for Combat in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 8. Equipping Your Character 2. Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 9. Character Advancement in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 1. Issue Number 11. Combat Resolution in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 2. Issue Number 1. Mystical Casting in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 2. Issue Number 2. Schools of Magic in Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 2. Issue Number 4. Psionic Psi. Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 2. Issue Number 5. Psionic 2. Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 2. Issue Number 6. Martial Arts Mojo. Polymancer Magazine. Volume Number 2. Issue Number 7. Martial Arts 2. Mojo. Pummel. Pick-up multi-genre miniatures. Easy to learn. Was a set of quick miniatures wargame rules, designed for adaptability to RPGs, so that RPG scenarios in Polymancer Magazine could have large-scale combats. Space Pummel. Space combat and ship design rules. Based on Pummel. See also. Polygraph. A quarterly anthology of science fiction, fantasy, horror, pulp, and other genres of speculative fiction. Also published by Polymancer Studios Inc. Polyglot. A game and entertainment industry newsletter. Also published by Polymancer Studios Inc. Notes. Polymancer Studios. Publisher. Polymancer Magazine. Polymancer Studios is MySpace page. Podcast about Polymancer Magazine. 3.5 Private Sanctuary. 3.4 All Games Considered. http www.agc podcast. Info 2008 12th AGC 94 December 30, 2008 Happy New Year. HTML 5. http www.agcpodcast. Info 2007_05_01_ HTML 6. http www.agcpodcast. Info 2007-08 AGC 56 August 4, 2007 Son of Big Damn. HTML 7. http www.agcpodcast. Info 2005_11_01_ HTML 8. Pulp Gamer 9. Dicecast by Polymancer Studios.